Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jenny Lesser. I'm the Business Development Manager here at United Training. Welcome to today's webinar titled Work Relationships, Influence, Inclusion, and Impact, presented by Matt Rush. We are using the GoToWebinar platform for today's webinar. We're recording this session and we will share a copy of the recording with you. We do encourage participation, so please use the questions option in the GoToWebinar dashboard. If you have questions, feel free to type them in, and Matt may also ask for feedback, and you can share that through the questions panel as well. United Training is excited to present this webinar today, and we encourage you to visit unitedtraining.com to find classes scheduled in our professional development practice. I will now hand it over to you, Matt.
Well, thank you very much, Jenny, and I appreciate it. Appreciate the intro so much. For all of you who are watching live or watching the recording, welcome. We're so thrilled that you're actually joining us today. Since this is a shorter session, what we're going to do is I'm going to give you just a few highlights, and then I'll actually probably turn my camera off so it doesn't get in the way of the slides themselves, and then we'll talk through that. I also have my trusty sidekick, my friend, we said we're the two old men off of the Muppets. So I have Mr. Damian Randisi is on with us, and he and I will be tag teaming a little bit of this. He'll be monitoring your questions. So if you do have questions, comments, thoughts, concerns, feel free to shoot those in, and he'll jump in and to make sure that we get those heard and get those answered. So Damian, you have anything you want to say before we begin?
Just good morning. Happy to be here.
All right. Way to keep it concise, brother. Don't steal my thunder. I'm just kidding. And I say that jokingly, obviously, because this whole session is about work relationships. And this is one of the things that I believe that we don't talk about this a lot. When we do trainings and when we do leadership training and all these other or technical trainings, we really, we get into the weeds on that, and we really get into the details on that, and we really dive in and see what the different facets of leadership are. But what is that one thing that when it comes to work, we all have to deal with every day? And it's the people that we work with. And to complicate that even more now, because of our current environment and the things that we've gone through over the last 6 months or so, things have really changed. Now we've got so much more of a virtual world that we're not as in person as we were earlier this year, and it looks like it's going to stay that way for a while. And maybe for some of us, this may be the actual quote new normal, to where we are working remotely. And that in and of itself throws an entirely another level of almost complication to work relationships. So now not only are we having to balance these people, the people that we work with, it's like, I know some of you are rolling your eyes because you know those people, right? We've worked with those people. So now we're not only having to balance working with those people, but now we're having to balance working with them remotely and dealing with them through a technology basis. So that throws a whole nother dimension to the importance of this. So I'm going to turn the camera off, and y'all follow along, and we're going to dive right into this. So this workshop really is about how do we do that? How do we start to balance that? And this is a whole day long class where we talk about influence, and we talk about inclusion, and we talk about impact. And those are all good, and we'll go through an immense amount of things when we go through this, where we'll really dive deep into what are relationships, how do we communicate, how do we build relationships, how do we actually develop and move those relationships forward. But for today's purposes, all we're really going to hit on is kind of like, how do we map this stuff out? How do we just begin to map out the balance of work relationships? The cool thing about this class, and it's one of the things that I really like, is that it applies to life. yeah, we're coming at it from a standpoint of work relationships because that's how most of you are going through this, is because you want to know how to improve your work, or your work's paying for it, or whatever. But this stuff is you can use this at home. I mean, this relationships happen on a continual and daily basis. And that's the cool part about this, is that it's not just a one and done deal. It's that we're actually going to be able to use this throughout it. So then let's start it. What are the origins of behavior? Because every one of us and every person that you know has a certain behavior. But the big thing is if we're going to lead others, we need to understand the origin of their behaviors, and quite frankly, the origin of ours. I mean, so we're not going to go through all that, but I want to give you just like a kind of that 30,000 view look at this, and what we'll give you just in our brief time together today, hopefully will help you identify those behaviors in yourself and in others, but more importantly, then be able to communicate to them. Because I say it all the time, what's more important, having a message or having a message heard? Obviously, it's having that message heard. It's getting that connection made. And the only way you can connect to someone else is if you are able to adjust your behavior and balance it with theirs and with somebody else's. So for today's purposes, there's really 4 communication styles and 4 behavioral patterns that we want to address. And you probably recognize all these. There's 4 basic ones. There's the passive behavior, there's the aggressive behavior, there's passive aggressive, and then there's the assertive behavior. And we've probably all been one of these at some point in time throughout our lives and throughout our careers. It's now, how do we recognize those? How do we move ourselves into that assertive behavior skill set so that we can have those beneficial work relationships? But then how do we identify somebody else if they're being passive, if they're being aggressive, or if they're being passive and aggressive? So let's look at each one of these, and then we'll get some feedback on these. Step number 1, the passive behavior. This is that person that avoids, they avoid things. They keep their opinions or their feelings to themselves. They're the one that's like just that quiet, reserved person. I always say these people have such obvious body language, because it is that poor eye contact, or maybe it's the slump position, or they tend to be that person that speaks real softly, or they're the ones that are, oh, I'm so sorry. They're apologetic over everything. So for those of you who are on, can you type in, name me some other characteristics of a passive behavior? Or Damien, do you have any that you can think of?
That's interesting, Matt, because my daughter she's 14, just started high school, and she's been texting me at 7 o'clock in the morning, which is very, very weird, right? And I'm
Right?
like, what are you doing? She's like, well, I'm in homeroom now, and I don't know any of these people because of the pandemic. They've now split classes. And she's developing some social anxiety, and it's exactly this passive behavior. So, she's sitting there, she's got her head down, she's not talking to anyone, she's not making eye contact because she doesn't want anyone to talk to her, because she's scared of what they're going to say, because she just doesn't know these people, and doesn't know how to act towards them. So when you said earlier that this is good for not just work but for outside, I think this is a class, and I have my daughter take a lot of our classes, right? I want her to be organized and such. But it's interesting because her last week, and she's always been a social butterfly, but her last week, she's so nervous and anxious about this new school that she's in this passive behavior, and I need to figure out how to get her out of that.
Oh, that's a great point. And one of the things that I thought about was, I just did a weekend retreat a training retreat this past weekend. One of the participants said the same thing about her son. He just went into high school as well. So then it's that whole going from junior high, and you're the big deal in junior high. Now you're the little fish in a big pond. And same deal. She said he had anxiety his first 2 days because of that.
Yeah.
So I say, this is a big deal, and it's a big deal for all of us. We can see this thing in people. I say it's obvious. They're the people that are unable to stand up for what their rights are, and even if it's something within the work environment, they just can't stand up for themselves, or they don't even know what those are. They get stepped on by everyone. You can hear the verbiage in these people. They'll talk about being weak or unable to take care of themselves, or they'll say things like, people never consider my feelings.
Yeah.
Go
What
ahead.
I just, sorry, Matt, for interrupting, was you can't let life just pass you by because you're scared. I mean, and that's basically what's happening, right? She's so passive the last couple of days that her day is just passing her by without being able to. And I told her, make new friends, understand, learn from people, and everything that we're trying to impart here in this. But she's basically letting life pass her by the last couple of days because of her anxiety and this type of behavior.
And let me ask you this, because I say that dealing with adults is no different than dealing with kids in junior high. I don't think it ever changes. What are you going to do? Like, how are you going to help her? And I know we're not going to get into this real deeply, but like, what's something that you could do to help get her out of that passive behavior?
Yeah, I mean, and that's a great question because she does know some of these people. So, I when I spoke to her last night about it, I said, so give me a couple of people in this homeroom class, and what do they do? Well, one plays softball, one plays basketball, one's in the band. Like, she knows enough about these people. So I said, well, you know all this information. You know basketball. You played basketball fantastically for the last 5 years. Go up and ask them a question about, what position do you play or something of that nature. And just what I explained to her was, you just have to ask one question. And then people are so, especially at that age, people are so absorbed in their life, like my daughter is, that they'll just talk to you. Oh, I play, point guard. I've been doing this for 17 years. And then you just find little pieces that you can connect to or answer or understand. And now you have a conversation. It's not like you have to come up there. What I told her was, it's not like you have to come up there with something brilliant. Just ask them a question about them and then listen. And once you listen, and you can take an active interest, and even if you're not interested, pretend like you're interested and ask follow-up questions. And that's how you build that relationship. And that's what we were just discussing yesterday, because she's always been a teacher's pet. That sounds bad, but it's not so bad in my view.
No.
And how she helps the teachers and actively listens and understands what they need. You can do that with your friends. Just pick out one thing that you know about them, ask them a question, and then usually, for the most part, people are going to tell you what you want to hear, and then you build a relationship and a connection that way.
You know what? That's sensational. And I've always said that I love this group of people. And as a former CEO, like when I ran a company and we had a lot of people in the office, these are the people that I would actively seek out. And why is that? Because just like you said, if you can just simply ask a few little questions and make a connection with them, these are the people who've been silent. But what have they been doing while they're silent? They've been observing what's going on. They see what's going on. They're not the ones out there speaking all the time. So then they've still got 2 ears and 2 eyes. So they've been listening and they've been watching. So you can actually, in the workplace, if you can tap into this group of people and draw information from this group of people, you can unlock a wealth of information about what is actually going on in and around your office or your workplace. But furthermore, what you also said also applies to adults. If you are this passive person and if you feel like you are the one who is reserved, okay, I got 3 words for you. Get over yourself. Get out of it. Yeah, life was not meant for you to be passed by. Work was not just something that we do, it's actually, you know, where we spend the majority of our lives. So then start figuring out how you can ask some of those 1 or 2 simple little questions. And if you want some help with this, there's a book you can read. It's a great book by John Maxwell. It's called Good Leaders Ask Great Questions. I have used the premise of that book from the time I read it for years now because of that. It helps you make those connections. It helps me as someone who's actually perfectly content to be quiet in a room of people. Like, I'm the extroverted introvert. I can be out there in front of everybody, but then the rest of the time I'm okay just to do my thing and pull back. So it helped me learn how to ask questions to then make those connections. So that's one behavior type. The next one is it's this aggressive behavior. Oh, and we all know this person. And if you are this person, I'm going to be talking at you because this is the person that they communicate in that dominant way. It's often very verbally or can even be physically abusive. You just see that behavior. Obviously, in the workplace, you're not going to see the physical aspect of that abuse, but you will absolutely catch the verbal abuse of that. People will, and it may be even in snarky remarks that just, you know, aren't blatant, but they're enough that we hear what they're saying. And if that's the passive person, they will really absorb those things. I say these are the people that they're the bullies, and a bully is a bully because they have low self-esteem, and that can be caused by a lot of different things from their past, whether that be physical or emotional abuse or unhealed emotional wounds or that feeling of powerlessness. The one thing that I say about this group of people all the time is that these are the people that are probably have some of the most low self-esteem of any other group of people on the planet, and they have that emotional baggage that they've never dealt with, and they just don't know how to deal with people, and they react instead of responding. And I say these are the people, they display a low tolerance for frustration. They use humiliation. They interrupt people frequently. They criticize. They blame or attack other people. And also their body language. These are the people that have that piercing look that can just, like, if you know in their head, it's like, if my eyes were laser beams, you'd be dead by now. Yeah, I'd sawed you in half. Like, they have that piercing look, but you can also tell that they don't listen. They're not hearing what actually is going on. So, Damien or anyone else on the webinar, what are some other characteristics of someone who is an aggressive behavior type?
Yeah, please feel free to put your answers in the chat. I'm monitoring the chat for Matt. So I know Jenny Lesser gave an answer to the previous one. From my experience, these are the people that yell a lot. That, you know, to me, even though this is unacceptable behavior in my eyes, these are the people that you just give your answer to, and then, you know, you tune them out after that, right? They're yelling at you, you know, because work is subpar or the numbers are subpar, and all they want is information, right? And all you have to give them is information, and let them go about their day. You know, you put your head down, you do your work the way you're supposed to, and you give them the information they need, and you just turn around. That doesn't mean that, you know, this is acceptable behavior, but you're always going to have those people who are just aggressive, and it's because they don't know the answer and they don't want to look stupid while someone calls them out on it, right?
Ooh, true story. When I was running the company in New Mexico, we dealt with someone in the office who was very aggressive. And there's a guy who worked for me. His name was Benji Segovia. And Benji was retired from one job. This was kind of a second job, a second career for him. And Benji was our sage. He was the wise older man that just had those nuggets of wisdom that were so phenomenal. So we even started calling them Benjiisms. So we had Benjiisms in the office. And one day after I had to deal with somebody who was very, very aggressive, Benji and I were friends as well. And I was getting some counsel from him and just bouncing some thoughts off of him and venting a little bit actually. And he said, Matthew, remember, the issue is rarely the issue. And I'm like, what? He goes, anytime someone's angry at you like that, he said, it's usually something else that's causing it. There have been no truer words ever spoken. When you're dealing with someone who is an aggressor, almost always it's because of something else that has been building up. I was able to then take that, and whenever there was this aggressive behavior coming out, I'd be like, whoa, 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 time out, time out, time out. Why the aggressiveness? What's going on? Like, is there something we need to do? And just by asking that question, it was amazing how many times that I've been able to use that you could see the walls start to come down, and people are like, it's like, oh, you just called the bully out, right? And anytime you call a bully out, it's almost always they'll shrink back, or at least they'll realize what they're doing. And they may have been in this position for so long, or this pattern for so long, that it's become a habit. And you just gotta, whoa, 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 time out. What's going on here? Like, why this aggression? Like, is there something going on that I need to know about? So those are just, we've seen these people, we've been these people. And I'm going to say this, if you have been the aggressor, or if you currently are, and you like, this is resonating, like, uh-oh, I've done this. Okay, you got to start dealing with some of that emotional stuff, because one thing that we know is absolutely 100% true, and that is emotion will override fact every time. I'll say it again, emotion will override facts every time. So if someone is coming from an emotional state, it doesn't matter what the facts of the situation are, the emotions are going to win, and the emotions are going to override what's reality. So you got to be able and be willing to deal with that. Now, I get that then when you're dealing with some of these people, some of them just have this arrogance, or this air of superiority, or they're entitled. They feel like they're entitled. I get that you're going to have those type of behaviors in the workplace as well. Just understand where they're coming from, and you can only deal with what you can deal with. But understand that's the reality, and that, hey, we can try to then to move forward, or maybe connect on a different level, or just change it up to where maybe we can deal with that. Does that make sense, Damien, or was that totally
Oh,
random?
no, it does. I think it goes back to that philosophy of the 360 coaching, right? Everyone coaches everyone else. I think that, and I think when in the longer class that United Training provides, we go into how to deal with these types, and how to effectively work through these relationships. But I think what you're saying is basically the 360 coaching. Yeah, everyone needs coaching, everyone needs feedback, everyone needs understanding. I think it's slightly different when it's your supervisor or director compared to a peer, where you might feel a little more anxious doing it to someone that in the org chart is a little higher. And then how to do that is something that we tackle in this class. However, the 360 coaching philosophy, I think, works for everyone, as long as you have that culture within your company, right?
That's right.
I think it just depends on the culture. And we're not going to sit here, and I think, Matt, you can agree, we're not going to sit here and tell you how to solve everything, right? It depends on your company culture, and that's something that will decide how you handle something, how you shouldn't handle something, or just based on your morals, ethics, and values, you're just going to do it no matter what the culture says any which way, because it's the right thing to do, right?
Yeah.
So I think 360 coaching is very important. Everyone should be coaching everyone, and everyone should be open to coaching. So when I am aggressive, and I rarely ever am aggressive myself, but when I am, I like for you, Matt, to say, hey, hold your horses a little. That's not how we work here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to me, it almost always just takes one time for somebody to be called out that they're doing it, to catch themselves. And it's like, oh, and in the full class of this, I'll even go into detail about some of the mistakes I've made, and they were driven by something else that was going on, that then somebody triggered it, and then I dumped, then I unloaded on them. Oh my good grief, how many of us have been guilty of that?
Yeah, but here's the thing, Matt. I think you and I can both agree, and hopefully everyone on the call, behavior changes don't happen because you take one class, right? Skill changes could happen. Like I could teach you how to organize yourself after an 8-hour class, but behavior changes have to be reinforced. Behavior changes have to be worked on. So if you came to me, Matt, and said, you know what, you're being a real jerk, Damien, here's not how we do it, understandable. But obviously there's something within me at this point in time that allowed me to think it was okay the first time. And I might take that coaching for a week or two, but then, you know, when I'm upset that my number is bad and the person next to me, I think, is holding me up, I might be aggressive again. So we have to remember that behavior changes don't happen after an 8-hour class or a 16-hour class. It's a program that you willingly have to work on in order to get better.
Ooh, that's so right. It's a program and a process that are going to require a lot of effort from a lot of different people. But like we've already said once, and we'll say it again multiple times, you can only control you. So if it starts with you, then hey, that is an amazing place to start. Especially if you're dealing with aggression, you need to check yourself. Hey, doesn't the world need to check themselves right now? And don't we all need to be in control more of our emotions so that we're not this person? Because in no way do we ever want to be the aggressor from this context right here. And so that is, you're right, it is a process, and it's not, we can't wave a magic wand and fix it. But hey, if we could just give you a baby step or a small little incremental thing to do, then that's awesome. So
Absolutely, and it's the tools that, sorry, Matt, where, you know, like after this class, you'll get links to reading, you'll get links to assessments, you'll get links to case studies and TED Talks that reinforce this content. So that way you're just not, you know, leaving, you know, writing it down and then, you know, a week later forgetting it. It's to reinforce. So I think that's a great part of what we do here. You know, just a quick little plug there, Matt. But I wanted to get that in.
No, and that's a awesome and a fair enough of a plug too, because it's about multiple steps and multiple layers. Obviously, the next one that we're going to deal with then is, hey, have you ever been, or do you know, the passive aggressive person? I would say that this was probably the one that I personally had to work on more than any of the other ones, as I even started working on myself to improve who I am. And this passive aggressive person, they're the ones that everyone appears passive on the surface, but really is acting out in anger or in that subtle, indirect, or behind the scenes way. And that's not good. Nobody likes that. Like, we don't want those people on our teams. We don't want to be that person. The passive aggressive behavior feels powerless or stuck, possibly even resentful. So then that resentful, that's a huge word. Like that word should describe this in a nutshell. You are the one who are going to be silent, but then you brew and internally brew, and you start letting that come out in other ways and behind the scenes, or at the coffee pod, or at the coffee maker, or you know, whatever. I say these are the people that express their anger by subtly undermining others. They frequently mutter to themselves instead of confronting another person. They're the ones that smile at you even though they're angry. And then they use subtle sabotage or speak with sarcasm. That's the passive aggressive person. And when I say this was the one I worked on, my big thing with this one was not to this extent, thank goodness. Mine was more of, I was so non-confrontational that I wasn't ever willing to be the assertive person. So then I let people take advantage of me to the point that then it began building up and it began causing internal anger or internal frustration more, that then it starts coming out in some other ways and with other people. So that was kind of more the way I dealt with it. Damien, what do you think, or anybody else? Feel free to type your thoughts in. What are some other characteristics of passive aggressive behavior?
Yeah, while we're waiting for people to type in the chat for this one, I use humor as a passive aggressive behavior. You know, I always say that I try to, lighten the situation with humor. But then I realize on occasion it's passive aggressive, right? It's a way to, in the past, I try not to do it anymore, but it's a way for, me to look good while I joke about Matt in front of the group in a joking way. But I know it's going to anger you slightly, right, Matt? It's going to make me look slightly better. So there's different ways of being passive aggressive. I try to do it in a humor. I tried to do it, using humor. But then I realized what I was doing. I was, trying to knock you down a peg or two, Matt, so that I would look better, right? And I'm undermining you, and it's something that I've had to work hard on not doing, because I'm naturally a sarcastic, in a funny way, kind of person, right? But or at least I think in a funny
Is
way.
that
But
why
in
we
the
get
end,
along?
that's why we're the two old men and the Muppets. However, that's a passive aggressive behavior that,
Yeah,
until
it is.
I actually looked at myself and said, you know what, this is what I'm doing, and that's not right.
No, it's not. My sister, I have a younger sister, older brother. We grew up in a household where sarcasm was spoken frequently. My sister even has a shirt that says "Sarcasm is my love language."
Yeah.
So that's how we grew up, and it was perfectly okay to be snarky with each other. And yeah, like you say, that is totally a passive aggressive move. So then when you carry that forward into the workplace,
Yeah.
okay, what are we trying to do here? Are we trying to build teams? Are we trying to build people? Are we trying to connect with people? And then how does even something like that on that level affect our ability to lead the people that we work with and for?
Well, I think it has a huge impact, because now all of a sudden, if my coworkers are like, and I always played it off by being like, oh, you could do it to me. I laugh, I enjoy it, and I do, because to me, it's playful banter. However, I'm now not being a cohesive group, because now all of a sudden my coworkers are like, well, is he going to try to embarrass me, or is he going to, say that, my work stinks, in a way that makes everyone laugh, but it leaves that thought as you leave the building, right? I mean, and it's a little bit of a bully. Um, so it's very interesting when you actually, look at yourself and say, what am I doing and how am I doing it? Am I building my teams? And I've led teams, in different countries, and use humor all the time, but I'm not building a cohesive team. I'm being passive aggressive and knocking down others. Would that now affect their confidence, which could impact their work production, which would impact whether or not they trust me going forward? So I think it has a huge impact when you're leading teams or part of a team and need to trust others and collaborate with them in order to work and hit your goals, no matter what your KPIs are.
Ooh, that's true story right there. And Jenny just typed in not confident or comfortable in a situation that can bring out that passive aggressiveness. So that goes right in hand with what you were just talking about. If anybody else has a suggestion or another characteristic that you've recognized, type that in the chat section, so we can see that. Because I would say that this is the behavioral pattern that more people fall into, more so than the other two. Is we do this, especially in the in a work environment, in a work situation. Um, and even we could even take this one to the home life too, because when Katie and I got married, okay, here I raised in this snarky household where, like you said, it was banter. She did not come from that type of a household whatsoever, at all. So then it was like some of my little joking one-liners were really hurtful to her.
Yeah.
And she several times she goes, that's really not that funny. And I was like, but to me it's hilarious.
Sure. Yeah, that's the story of my life. That's why I'm not married, Matt. That's
I'm glad you're on this class now, so going forward you can be better. uh, and that's one of the things, I'll be honest and totally transparent with everybody who's on and who watches this later. We're not perfect at this stuff. These are things that, like, for me, I have to work on this constantly. I have to keep myself aware of how I am communicating with different people. Oh, and Tiffany said feeling threatened and being defensive rather than being open to feedback. How many times have we all been given feedback and then the natural instinct that we have is to either feel like we're being threatened or we become defensive with it. So Tiffany, you're exactly right, and that's 100% true. So this can play out in a number of different ways within an individual or within a company. But going back to something that Damien said earlier, this comes down to also culture. There can be somebody who is the leader, the boss, the CEO, whatever you want to call them, whatever title they have for you, that they may be this person, and therefore they may breed this atmosphere of passive aggressive behavior or the snide snarky remarks or whatever. And again, you can only do what you can do. You can only handle what you can handle. Typically, even with that, it only took Katie 1 or 2 times from the very beginning saying, some of those little, she even said, what's that saying about there's a little bit of truth to every funny remark? It's like,
Yeah.
oh, that's actually really true.
Yeah.
So we have to be able to balance that. Obviously, these are the first 3 patterns that we wanted to address and talk about when it comes to work relationships. Lastly, we want everyone to move towards this spot of having that assertive behavior where you're actually able to communicate in a way that really clearly states your opinions and your feelings, and you can then advocate for what is right and what your rights are or what your needs are without violating or threatening someone else's rights. Assertive communication is literally born out of high self-esteem. Assertive communication is born out of self-confidence. That is not arrogance. It is just being comfortable in who you are, how you are, and what you do, and how you do what you do, being good enough at that then when somebody does say something to you from one of those other patterns, you're able to deal with it, you're able to handle it, you're able to then communicate back in a way that really does put the value on yourself, on your time, on your emotional, your spiritual, and your physical needs, but also on other people's time, emotional, spiritual, and physical needs. Assertive behavior pattern in people, these are the ones who are strong advocates for themselves while being very respectful of the rights of other people. Whew, man, couldn't the world use a whole lot more of this right now? So, what are some other characteristics of someone with an assertive behavior? Damien, what do you think while others are typing?
These are the people that that for me are, the ones that sit back, and they tell you, in a not hurtful way. They tell you exactly how they feel. They tell you why they think they're correct. They use, data, and reason in their answer. And they don't beat around the bush. They tell you how it is, what they believe it is, and then here's the reasons why. To me, very, as it says, respectful, and just comes out. And those are the people that, in the end, these are the people that you trust, right?
Ooh, that's good.
You know that these are the people that are going to tell you exactly how it is, and they'll give their opinion, and there's some opinion in there. But these are the people that I think everyone on this call and who's listening, there's always people that you go to that you trust, and it's because they're assertive, they give their opinion, they tell you how they feel, but they don't do it in a way that belittles your opinion or how you feel, or where you stand at that point in time. And it's just the people that you gravitate towards when you need something, or when you need to back up something, or when you just want to hear a different perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh, and
And
Sarah said it's the trustworthy people who are trustworthy, the people who are the good coworkers.
yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Wouldn't shouldn't we all aspire to that? And Tiffany, having empathy. I say that the word empathy is probably one of the most underused but highly valued words that we don't use when talking about how we deal with other people. And that is, we have got to be more empathetic. And like Tiffany, like you said, understanding how others will receive information. Okay, there it goes back to what I said from the beginning. What's more important, having a message or having a message heard? Obviously, sometimes we're going to have to get over ourselves, be comfortable enough in ourselves that we can then change the way we say something so that other people actually can receive it. Like you said, Tiffany. And I say these are the people that they're just confident in who they are. They're comfortable in their own skin. And really they accept the fact that, hey, I can't control other people, but I can control myself. I can speak clearly, I can speak honestly and straightforward to the point, like you said, Damien. But I also can be respectful and understand where somebody else is coming from. I say these are the people who are the ones who would be completely open and transparent to say, hey, I'm responsible for my own happiness. Like I'm in control of me. Um, we're all equally entitled to express ourselves respectfully to one another. And at the end of the day, we should still be able to do that and go home as friends, or at least find some type of common ground. When we do live events with this class, one of the things that I love to do is I love to see people who in certain regards are polar opposites, whether that be their personality, their politics, their professional careers, whatever that might be. I like to see people who are polar opposites and see how they're able to find ways that they are alike, because it doesn't matter how different you are, we can all find something that we can agree on or some similarity that we have in each other. That doesn't change who we are, it doesn't change where we're from, it doesn't change our beliefs maybe, but it at least takes the walls down and allows us to be open and transparent with other people. If you can do this, this is a gift, wouldn't you say, Damien?
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. Sorry, I had to hit the unmute there. It is a gift, and it's something that when you find someone who can do it, this takes a lot of work to understand how to do it properly. If you're coming from a good place, you can find it, but it does take some work to make sure that you're crafting it. And maybe that's my problem. I'm trying to craft it when these people are just the real people, right?
Yeah. And maybe that's a part of the process that we talked about, is that maybe you have to you have to go through those levels of, you don't know what you don't know, but you got to move up to where you know what you don't know. And then the what is that called, the levels of oh, I can't even think of the word there, the levels of acceptance or the level of knowledge. um hey, you don't know what you don't know, but we want to move you to where you know what you don't know, and then you know that you know what I'm saying? And then you get to where it's just, you know what you know, and then it becomes a habit. So it's that whole process of putting this stuff into play to where you can become comfortable enough with who you are, which really ultimately comes down to your self-image and how
Yeah,
you see yourself and your abilities, and then how you're able to use your confidence and your self-image to then make it the habit to where you can help somebody else out along the way.
absolutely, absolutely. A
So
work in
hey, so I'll ask you this, Damien. What causes these behaviors?
Well, I would say, how you were raised, how you're coached, how you would take feedback, and this is probably a good answer, from anyone in the group. The culture, how confident you are, how much you think you're understanding of that relationship, and I think one of the most important ones is how you've been treated by that person, right? It's funny because I take these, in the past, always taken your personality tests and all this other stuff. And I always say, and I hope everyone agrees, I'm different with different people because that's how these people treat me, right? I'm not passive to the majority of people in my life, but there are some people I am passive. I'm not aggressive in nature, for the most part. But for some people, I am, because that's just, how that relationship has built. I'm not assertive for everyone, because I'm naturally passive. I'm not passive aggressive all the time, but that's just because I find that funny, in my sarcasm, and not all the time anymore. But a lot of it has to do, at least in my opinion, is how people have treated me in the past, and that has caused a learned behavior, right?
Yeah, and okay, so then that brings up the point that we really want to drive home with this, is that we want to remind everyone that this is both a form of behavior as well as a style of communication. And I
Hmm.
do think there's a difference between the two, but those are two things that are completely separate but completely tied together, don't you think?
I would agree with you 100%. And everything, there's a cause and effect to everything, right? And I think those two definitely lead to a cause and an effect.
Yeah, and you can actually see the relationship between a communication style and a behavior. And we use a big term in this, and we call it foreshadowing. Like you
Mm.
can see how a behavior then transmits itself into a communication style. So when it comes to work relationships and having positive, powerful work relationships, we've got to be able to understand the differences between these things and then get to where, hey, we can move it from the passive or the aggressive, or towards that assertiveness, because that's where we want to go.
Yep.
You want to add anything else to that before we do the last piece here?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. The last piece that I want to bring up in today's session here is really this thing called ego states, because this is another level of communication, and that really you can see it uh, resonating in the work environment. And we call it that there are three modes. There is the parent mode, the child mode, and the adult mode. Um, and I want to talk a little bit about each one of these. That parent mode is that one where it's you treat everyone like they're a kid, and you have that, I say, that teacher voice. Like, I come from a family of teachers. My mom teach, my sister, my brother-in-law, my aunts, my cousin. So like at any family gathering, it's like we're all in their classroom and they're just all telling the rest of us what to do and how to do it. And it's like, okay, we're not your kids here. So you can even see this coming out in that kind of environment. It's that external voice of authority and informed of the attitudes and the demeanor of the parental and authority figures in our lives, that then we start passing that on to someone else. The child mode is that you could really almost tie that into that passive mode. It's mostly subjectively interpreted through our senses and our emotions. It's in this state we're focused primarily on ourselves and in the moment. How many people have you worked with that you felt were stuck in child mode? Like, you know who those people are, and you've had to deal with them. And it's like, you want to look at them and say, hey, buck up, buttercup. You got to grow up here. Like, you got to take responsibility for this and you got to try to help those people move into that assertiveness.
Yeah, I think you're talking to me, Matt. So I understand. I take the feedback. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm glad you picked up on that. Sarcasm spoken freely here. So we really want to get in the concept and in the terms of work relationships. We want to move it to where it is in that adult mode. We want to have that as our preferred mode of behavior for social interactions. We want it to be that state that assesses before acting. I say this is the mode which is truly a learned mode, and it is truly when you understand people and you understand the dynamics of people's personalities and their styles and their patterns of behavior, that then you can actually respond versus reacting. And I say that takes that assessing a situation before you do react to it. It allows you to be more organized in that, adaptable, thoughtful, and really, and it's that this next piece, that emotional intelligence. Like, this is something we will teach entire classes on, is how do you have emotional intelligence, personally and professionally. As self-aware adults, we can self-manage our emotions, and we can actually choose our responses. This is the true voice in your head, the wholly formed version of yourself. And I know that that's a big statement right there, but it is that, hey, it is that checking yourself so that then you can process that correct response instead of that emotional reaction that we're so likely to have, whether that be from the parent mode talking to a coworker or a subordinate, or whether that be coming from the child mode and reacting like the child and throwing it back, either internally or actually physically doing that. We got to get to that point where we're in that adult mode, and this can be done so quickly in our heads. I mean, our brains were designed to respond so fast that we can actually, in the splitting of a second, we can change it from a reaction to a response. I say, if you want to learn how to do this, before you respond to anything anyone says or does to you, take one breath. I mean, literally pause for 1 second, 1001. In that amount of time, literally, your brain rewires itself, because that reaction comes from a different part of the brain than a response does, and literally it can change it in the blink of an eye, the pause of a second, to that spot where, hey, we need to respond versus reacting. We need to look at this from an adult standpoint, and we need to get over ourselves and not be that parent-child mode. What are
You
your
know,
thoughts,
that
Damien?
this is fantastic because I don't know if anyone watches air disasters on the Smithsonian Channel, but I do, because I had a fear of flying, and that's how by learning about how airplanes work. So they were talking about how these people made an instant reaction. These pilots made an instant reaction to a problem, and that instant reaction was not a good one. And they say that in the military, at least what this gentleman said, and it's something I took to heart. I think it was like 2 days ago. In the military, you're told to have a cup of coffee before you make a decision, which just basically means sit back, understand all of the inputs, and then respond properly, right? And this is now the second time I've heard this in the last couple of days. And it's really interesting when you think about, how many times do you actually just sit back and internalize the information and then make an adult decision instead of making a rash one or one that you think is right. If you have the time to sit back and have your cup of coffee, and it doesn't have to be 5 minutes, it could be 10 seconds, but just internalize the information and then make that decision. You're going to make a better decision, I would assume, almost every single time, right?
Ooh. Yeah, absolutely. And really and truly, we are, this may sound really weird, but it's so true. We are every age we've ever been, and we can show up as a different age and under different circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
I use the examples that sometimes when we don't want to do something, our 2-year-old version of ourselves shows up and wants to pitch a fit, mentally stomp our feet, or throw out that childlike voice of, I don't want to do that. Or other times it seems like our junior high self comes out with the who's in and who's out mentality of the group. And then there are those times that we hear the voice of our own mother, father, teacher, whomever that might be, coming out of our mouths. I mean, how many of us have said something, and as soon as it came out, you're like, oh my goodness, sounded just like my dad. And we
Matt,
realized that we were there.
we had that probably 15 minutes ago when we said if we aren't 15 minutes early to be 15 minutes early, you're late. Where did I learn that from? I learned that from my mother, right?
Uh, that's exactly right. So when
Yeah.
it comes to this, we are We are a combination of every age we've ever been in all those stages of life, whether that be the parent, the child, or the adult, are going to try to sneak out at some point in time. So Jenny says this happens all the time. Absolutely it does. And sometimes I used to have this t-shirt that said roses are red, violets are blue. I'm schizophrenic and so am I. Like isn't it amazing how many voices can talk to you in your head even as you're having a conversation, right? I mean, does that make sense? Like we can have multiple conversations with ourselves and it's like the little devil angel on one shoulder and the devil on one shoulder, the angel on the other. We can come out in multiple different times in our lives and we've got to then be be cognizant of ourselves enough to have that ability to respond with some emotional intelligence to any situation. And like you said, Damien, this comes from strictly it can come just as the pause. I mean, it can come from that cup of coffee, that mental break that you give yourself just to make sure that you don't get caught up in someone else's emotional response. Because what happens when it comes to work relationships, if someone comes to us in an emotional state with maybe they're they're an assertive pattern and they're in an emotional state and they're coming to us with the parent pointing their finger at you, emotionally charged, what then happens if we try to match them in that assertive, in that same state? What's going to happen to the conversation? It's going to blow up. And you can't, you're going to end up in a fight that way. Or if they come to you as in that parent mode and an assertive mode, and you fall back into that passive childlike behavior, then they're going to run all over you. Okay, so that's when it's like, hey, wait a minute, there's a combination of all of this stuff at play here. We got to kick it to we got to be assertive, but we also have to be the adult in the room. We can only adult how we can adult. And some people don't adult very well. Sometimes I don't adult very well. But that's what it's all about, is getting to the point that we can all be adults and handle the emotions. And then and only then can we truly connect with other people that we're working with and then be able to lead other people. Damien, do you have any thoughts, comments, questions, concerns, or anyone who's listening? Do you have any thoughts, comments, or questions? Anybody want to add anything in?
I don't. This hour flew by. But this to me is amazingly interesting, and learning, how you behave, how you react, and how that impacts relationships. I think is, as you said at the start, probably the most important thing we do at work on a daily basis, unless I sit behind my computer and never talk to anyone ever. And I don't know how many of us actually do that. I mean, we're dealing with people every single day, whether personally or professionally. So I think this last hour has been very informative, that's for sure.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciated your input as well. This is a topic that I love because it deals with personalities, and I love trying to figure out somebody's personality, figuring out where they're coming from, and then try to build those meaningful connections. Our goal with this, even this hour-long class, is to give you some tools for your toolbox, some nuts and bolts, some nuggets that then you can take and put into play. Melissa, thank you very much for the compliment. She said this has been very great informational. This has been a great informational session, and she says she feels enlightened. Thank you for that, because that's what we want to do. Even in an hour-long segment, we wanted to give you things that you could actually use to become a better connector of people and be able to have those improved work relationships. If you or your team want to take this to a much deeper level, reach out to us. Let us know. We would love to take you through the day-long class where we can give you the full portfolio of what we can do to identify other people, connect with other people, and then hopefully be able to lead other people. Our ultimate goal is to help you become the best version of yourself, because if we can help you become the best version of yourself, then we know that then you can help somebody else become the best version of themselves as well. And that is when we know we can make a positive and impactful change in the world, is when we can help each other do more, be more, and have more than we ever thought possible. We just have to be willing to get over ourselves long enough to get there. So with that being said, thank you so much for your time today. Reach out to us if we can help you additionally, and we look forward to seeing you in future webinars down the road. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you have a way gooder day.
Thanks, Matt. That was great. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, friend. Talk to y'all later.